the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner. Another appointment to visit Farmer Chris at High Ash Farm. And here I am. Rather wet morning, quite windy as well. Bit of a storm coming in. Grey, leaden skies. And Chris told me to meet him in the farm office. So maybe we're going to be doing this indoors today. Let's see if we can find Chris Skinner and get the podcast underway. Let's go in the office here and... Oh, here he is.
Matthew! I should have been out to greet you. I'm sorry about that.
Your inner sanctum here, isn't
Yes, and sitting in the warm farm office.
I better put the wood in the hole there.
Yes, shut the door. It's warm.
There we go.
Heated as well. Luxury this morning. Look, it's a bit wild and woolly outside there, and we're getting some quite heavy rain forecast shortly, so I thought I'd catch up with some of the paperwork in the farm office. We're surrounded by sort of computers. There are 3 screens.
Which one do you use?
No, have you seen my fingers? They're called sausages. I've yet to turn one on and turn one off, so I'm way behind the times, but in a way I'm ahead of myself as well, and I'm looking behind me because there's some aerial photographs of the farm which pretty much records the farming history here from the 1960s and 70s. That one's 1969, I think, with all the old farm buildings, clay block buildings, dairy cows grazing round, beef cattle being fattened in the buildings at this time of the year, and a huge change in the amount of people working here on the land. When I was born, around 30 full-time employees. Can't believe it. And then almost in the early 2000s, almost doing it all by myself. So a history of farming change, and that's something farmers don't like. They like tradition, they like predictability, and these days in modern agriculture you don't have that anymore. Anyway, the Norfolk mottos do different, and this week it's been slightly different for me. I had an appointment letter from Papworth Hospital, and I had to go down yesterday and took the train down. Normally I'd drive, but heading south and west from Norwich, there's quite a lot of roadworks. The weather was a little bit unpredictable, so I did something unusual and took myself to the local station, bought some train ticket to get me there and back, really reasonably priced, and sat in the train, travelled south and west, sort of heading out through Norfolk, past Wymondham, Attleborough, and then Brandon, and then suddenly the scenery outside the train changed, and I went into Breckland, and I'd kind of forgotten what it's like, because being a farmer, I'm stuck on the farm here as almost part of the machinery, really. And I just remember those pine corridors that were put between the fields to help stop the sand blowing. Breckland is basically light, sandy, almost acidic soil in places, alkaline in other places. Lots of the places the train flashed through without stopping had Warren at the second part of their name, and that meant that it was rabbit country, and that was the main crop. Then myxomatosis arrived in the early 1950s in the UK and wiped out a lot of the rabbit population as well. And so warrening, the art of keeping rabbits in particular sandy areas, actually dropped away. Cereal prices went up, and a lot of that land was reclaimed into kind of low quality agricultural land, perhaps with irrigation, but those old pine belts are still there. Then the Forestry Commission was formed, late 1940s, early 50s, and a lot of that, and it's almost the UK's largest forest area, south-west Norfolk. You've got all the conifer plantations which have been mature, been felled and replanted, and as we went drive down through there in the train, you could actually see new larch plantations, Scots pine, Sitka spruce plantations galore, all done in neat rows of forestry commission planting, very dense, very tall telegraph poles because the trees need to get to the light. You can almost touch the trees if you put your hands out sideways, and very dark as well on the forest floors.
If you want to find this on the map, just look at where Norfolk, Suffolk and Cambridgeshire meet on a county map. And it's like heathland and very sparsely populated, vast tracts of land that isn't populated.
Exactly that. And I was surprised to see some open dune areas because travelling down through Breckland, it was sandy. There was still some sort of heathland where heather grows. If it's slightly alkaline, when the sand level is not too deep, that's how the glaciers left it at the last ice age. If the sand is not deep, there's chalk immediately underneath, and you can have chalk-loving plants there. And then you have the acidic sands as well, where there's some really rare plants growing, and the sand isn't stable at all. It can still blow about. The rabbits, of course, digging their warrens way back in the 50s and 60s, helped to destabilise that area. And then, almost by magic, you travel from Suffolk and the Norfolk boundary into Cambridgeshire. And looking out of the train window, I was still sort of in forest mode in my head. Suddenly, almost up against the railway line, was jet black soil. And I was just shocked to see it and realised I'd gone from sort of this acid, alkaline Breckland habitat, where it's completely different, to fen peat, jet black soil, some of the richest, most productive soil in the United Kingdom, just a stone's throw from where we're sitting. This was about 45 minutes into the train journey, which is just over an hour. So as you go into Cambridge, fen soils both ways, some of the fields waterlogged, some of the fields not waterlogged and just freshly tilled. And then I started to notice the bird population on this freshly tilled soil right by the railway line, hundreds and hundreds of lapwing. And we've had them here at the farm when you get the really cold weather over in Western Europe, and they will come across the North Sea. They're called nomadic birds, but our UK population, it's a red list species, has dropped away dramatically, and they're very selective about where they're flying to and where they're going to feed. And that freshly tilled soil, perhaps with a high soil invertebrate population, things like worms and all the invertebrates that live in peaty soil. And of course, I had to realise that the train was travelling quite high up, and that land is actually beneath sea level. You could see the dikes and the rivers beside the railway line.
A lot of the fens is shrinking, isn't it?
Yes, and that's the whole problem. Once you cultivate high organic soil, you introduce oxygen. The peat then oxidises and reduces year on year. So that's one of the problems. And so it's a resource that's actually fading away from us. It's a fossil resource, actually, from the old peat levels and sort of reed beds that were there. They were drained in the 15th and 16th century. A lot of Dutch engineers came across from Holland who were expert in this, and they got their hands on the drainage techniques, windmills, of course, to pump the water off those low fields and reveal this sort of black gold, because it's some of the most fertile soil in the country. Today we use it for growing vegetables, potatoes and other specialist crops. There was a few fields of cereals, and then I did have to smile because about 2 or 3 miles after I'd seen the lapwings, 2 or 3 of the fields were covered in greylag geese. They were absolutely revelling in the winter wheat. Some poor farmer had planted, and they were grazing away, again quite close to the railway line, and then different species of geese. And then I saw a field with about 25, 30 mute swans on there as well, which was quite entertaining. And then all of a sudden into Cambridge and out of the train and off to Papworth to meet my surgeon.
But you'll have seen the Isle of Eels, wouldn't you, on the way?
Yes.
That's quite a spectacular highlight of that train trip.
Yes, it absolutely is. And, one of the trees right by the railway line, water all around the tree. I should think there were 20, 25 cormorants sitting in there. What a sight. I mean, and so I chose exactly the right journey. And
the right seat as well. Thank goodness you were next to the window.
Yeah, absolutely. Train was quite quiet because it was off-peak. I sort of went at 10 o'clock and I was back in Norwich for 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I did have to desert Rat and my terrible terrier. So he was frantically looking for me when I got back. And I've never had so much kissing in my life.
The reason for the journey was to go to the hospital, wasn't it?
Yes, it's Papworth Royal Hospital. I met my surgeon and he's given me a timeline for the operation. Not one bypass, not two, but a bit like Norwich, we've got several bypasses. I'm going to have 3.
You don't do things by half, do you?
No, and they're going to get on with it because I'm called asymptomatic. It's quite an interesting word, which means I've got heart problems, but I'm not showing them. So I'm very, very lucky indeed to be in the situation I am and to be fit and healthy. And so they're going to get the operation underway in the next 6 weeks, and I'll perhaps be in Papworth for about a week. And but hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll do a few extra podcasts before then. It will be heading into spring at that time. So we'll be able to hopefully, fingers crossed, keep this countryside podcast going as it is, with a few smiles and a few surprises as well. And I won't take you through the operating theatre, I promise.
Yeah, well, I'm not coming to go in there with the microphone.
Oh dear. And so there we are. So, right, we've got some questions to answer when we come back, but because it's windy, I was going to take us into the woodland because there's some flowering plants, but I've got another site where something similar is happening. So we're going to pop in the farm truck and just pop down the road about a quarter of a mile and enjoy some of the plants that are flowering in late winter. So, you ready? You'll need your hat on for this one.
Well, all that wind makes the woodland a bit dangerous, but yes. I mean, it wouldn't do, would it, with all the NHS treatment in the offing, then to get clonked on the head?
No, and that's very likely this morning. We've got ash trees standing in the woodland. After all, it's High Ash Farm, and I'm quite shocked to see no root structure on quite a number of them. It's been attacked by ash dieback, and they just come over with no warning whatsoever, and so it's for health and safety reasons we're going to abandon the woodland idea and just visit some freshly planted woodland quite close to where we're sitting. So out the office, out of the warm, put your hat on, Matthew, and hope we don't get too windswept. Off we go.
Just do the zip up against the wind, which is actually, we're quite sheltered here in this little woodland, aren't we?
Yes, Matthew, this is welcome to the lettuce wood. Health and safety means the trees here are only about 20 feet tall, and the high winds that we're expecting doesn't really affect these younger trees. And Rat is with us. He's managed to come out of the truck and he's allowed to wander around in here, and he disappeared into the undergrowth straight away.
He quite likes it here, doesn't he?
He does. There's plenty of things to sort of sniff and find. There's a really good understory here, newly planted woodland, and it's got really well established now. Probably getting on for 500-600 young oak trees. There's one quite close to us. Absolutely, that's going to be a stunner. If you leave anything behind you, it would have to be an oak tree in my case, you know, with a 200-300 year lifespan ahead of it and lots of room around it. And we've got a little track through the middle of this newly planted woodland with permissive access, so you can actually walk through. You can feel the soil is wet underneath us. We had quite a good rainfall at the moment, which is very welcome.
It's coming down heavier now as well, isn't
it? This is clay soil as well, so a little bit impervious, good wheatland, but the field was only a hectare. It's only 2.5 acres. It was the smallest field on the farm, and when my father came here to High Ash Farm in the early 1940s, there was a crop of lettuces here, and the previous farmer left the whole field and just deserted it and never harvested them. It was vacated in Michaelmas, which is around about the 25th of September, and ever since then it was always called the lettuce field, so we call it the lettuce wood now. And you can see the track that goes through the middle of this. It's really lovely to walk through, young trees full of promise. There's a lot of hornbeam here, and the edges of the track have been planted. They're called a soft edge, and you can see there's shrub plants here, and one of which is hazel. Now, about 2 podcasts ago, we had a question on late winter, early spring flowers, and actually what pollinates them. And I said you won't find butterflies about at this time of the year, but you will find moths, and there are other flying insects out and about. It's a species called winter gnat, for instance, and they can carry out pollination. But some of the plants are self-pollinating, which is really unusual. One that we have talked about in the past, the sweet violet, Viola odorata, can self-pollinate without the flowers actually even opening, and the sort of pollen inside self-fertilizes, and you can get viable seed from it. It's a kind of clone of the original pen. Oh, muntjac deer just ran straight across the track from one side to the other.
Oh, yes, I saw the white backside there.
Yes, that's it, with its tail erect, and obviously we know where Rat is now. He's on that side of the track, and the deer sort of ran across. In a sort of millisecond it was gone. But hazel has a lot of history. There are 3 plants of what's called white magic, and it goes right back to Stone Age times and Celtic times, a couple of thousand years ago at least. A lot of history. White magic needed the 3 plants, which was hawthorn, rowan and hazel, and because in woodland they were meant to be bad spirits, and if you had all 3 growing, it would protect you against anything that might be bad happening out in the woodland itself. It was meant to be quite an evil place to be, so if you got those plants you were protected as well from any bad magic that might be about. So the hazel, I failed to mention one method of pollination, and that is wind pollination, and it's quite appropriate this morning.
So we've got some wind today.
We've got some wind. And
how?
Would you believe it, that the pollen, because we're right at the end of January, early February now, the pollen is actually blowing off these catkins. And if we right beside us, we've got some catkins. Also, in my childhood, they were called lamb's tails.
They're lovely examples, these, about 2 or 3 inches long.
They are. They're incredible, aren't they? So these are traditional hazel catkins. When you actually look at a catkin, I'm just going to get one on my finger, it's about as long as a good cigarette, to put it in perspective. There's about 100 little flowers on all the way down, and from about 0 degrees centigrade, so anything slightly above freezing, they'll be releasing their pollen at the moment. And hazel are not self-pollinating. You need, if you're going to grow them in your garden to get the hazel nuts, you need 2 plants at least, because hazel will not produce pollen to fertilise its own female component. So when we look up to the top of the tree, some of the catkins are only just beginning to emerge. They're about an inch and a half long, and the ones down at the bottom of this particular hazel shrub, I'd nearly called it a tree.
It's about 12 foot tall, though,
It is, yes. It's one of our smallest UK native trees, to put it in perspective. Nothing like an oak, but nevertheless they form a really important part of our history. So the pollen on windy days, even at low temperatures, is released over quite a long period of time, perhaps a month. The little tiny catkins start to form right back in October and November in the previous year, and this is their time before, this is the important bit, before the hazel comes into leaf. So the wind can pass through and the pollen goes here, there and everywhere. We mentioned those peat soils in Finland, and if you dig right down to the full depth of the peat and look at it, it's a kind of fossil layer, of organic matter. One of the components that's in there is right at the end of the last ice age, 10,000 years ago, is quite a good level of hazel catkin pollen. So it actually fossilizes, and you can identify it with a microscope in there. So it's got a long history of one of the earliest plants to re-inhabit the UK countryside after the last ice age 10,000 years ago, and it would start to form with birch and other early colonisers. But the important thing is all those species, like alder as well, are wind pollinated, and so they can get themselves about quickly, and whereas oak trees take a lot longer because they need the acorns and takes considerably longer. So you had this tiered introduction of our landscape reforesting itself after the last ice age. Right, so that's the male part of the catkin, the hazel shrub that we've got here, and the female part is really inconspicuous, and you have to look and search quite closely for it. And just by coincidence and chance, just look here, there's two little buds, and they tiny, and one there, and they look like little, anybody who's ever seen a sea anemone, blood red. You have a little bud with tiny little anthers coming out of it. Looks like almost a little red spider coming out of the tip.
It's like a red flower, isn't it? But
yes.
Really small.
Yes, and that's why, when we mentioned wind pollination, the pollen's coming off, but generally the pollen from this tree doesn't fertilise its own little female component, so they need to crossbreed to be fertile. So there we are, a little bit of history. But hazel's also got such an important part of our history. We're smiling because there's a seat in the middle of this woodland here. It's a little double seat that I've made out of an oak trunk. And Rat has gone to sit beside it because he doesn't think this is sort of clement weather for him to be out in. He's meant to be a working dog.
Yeah, he doesn't like the rain, does he?
He's a shirking dog, so would you believe he's going to head back to the truck by himself? Come in here, get some proper work done, look. He's not into this. That hazel formed such an important part in sort of 17th, 18th century as well. The hazel was managed by woodmen, and they coppiced it. And to coppice, a copse is a small wood, but to coppice is to cut something. It comes from a French word, couper, or cooper, which means to cut. And you could cut the hazel, and then it would regrow, and you'd have these long straight poles coming off it. You could do it with sweet chestnut as well, but hazel was the main component, and you could actually weave all the produce that hazel produced.
Could you make a hurdle or something like that?
Yes, you could. I can actually do that.
You're a hurdle maker.
Oh, I was hurdle. I used to jump them as well at the races at school. And yes, I could weave hazel, and occasionally we cut our hedges with a finger cutter to cut off the hazel at about it'd be 4 to 5 foot long growth, about an inch thick, and you can weave that into hurdles quite easily. It was quite a skilled job, but it was also used on the farm for things like broachers, which held the thatch on the top of hay stacks and straw stacks before they were thrashed. Remember, the actual cereal fields were harvested before they were ripe, and they were put into stooks in the field and then pitched onto a trailer and stacked in a stack yard, and then they'd be harvested. The grain would be harvested any time between November, December and January. So a lot of history, and hazel was used all through that period. It was really important. But
not to mention hazelnuts.
Yes, yeah, and
good flavouring for food.
Cob nuts is one species, and filberts. That's another. I think it's from a French saint, Saint Philbert, and that's where they come from. Filbert nuts are really, really delicious. Cob nuts, the Kentish cob nut, is almost red in colour and really nutritious. Just so much carbohydrate, protein and starch in it, and you can cut them up and mix them with your cereal, and really, really valuable food. So there we are, things that flower late winter, early spring, and one of which is the hazel, and it's wind pollinated, so you know all about it now, or some of the secrets of it, and it's full of history, and one of the early occupiers after the last ice age, a hardy plant. Unlike that dog who's running back to the truck as quick as he can. Rat, you're a lightweight.
Ornithological magic. The sound of one of our most competent songsters, the song thrush. Turdus philomelos, member of the thrush family, obviously. Robins, nightingales, blackbirds, all members of the same family, as well as the winter visiting thrushes that can also sing, the filfare and the redwing, but none as competent as this. It's got a UK look-alike, also a resident, like the song thrush, which is the missel thrush. That's our largest native thrush species. And it does sing similar notes, but it's jingly-jangly, whereas the song thrush seems to be polishing his song. Like this, often singing each note 2 or 3 times, just to get it perfect. It's right at the end of January, so he's chosen a little area of woodland here in the corner of High Ash Farm. It's called Notre Dame Wood, planted in 1990, and there's some blackthorn shrubbery together with some planted British native trees, some ash, oak, and he's chosen the top of one of the native species, some field maple, which is quite dense, and I don't think he can actually see me. Well, it's early morning, it's just light, and he is practicing beyond belief his dawn chorus. There's going to be a lucky lady in his life, because I've just been listening for about 5 minutes, and it's just thrilling. Kind of, it's a gloomy, there's no sun up yet, it's a gloomy morning, heavy cloud, bit of drizzle overnight, but somehow that song cuts through the whole lot effortlessly. You can hear in my voice, it's changed an ordinary morning into an extraordinary morning. Absolutely love it, and he's carried on singing while I'm standing 20 feet beneath him. Early nesters too, that traditional sort of grass-shaped cup nest, but slightly different to a blackbird, and the song thrush lines the nest with some mud and then lays the most extraordinarily beautiful eggs, just pure sky blue with little dark brownish or black dots all over the base of the egg. And those early nests often escape predation because the predators haven't yet started to increase their food requirements when they themselves have young in the nest, and that's when you see a lot of nest predation, jays, magpies. We can sort of point the fingers at all of them, but they've all got to live. It's eat or be eaten, as I often say out in the countryside. But this just gladdens the heart, it's just glorious. And what better way to set out your patch of the world than sitting on top of a tree, singing your heart out to say, this is mine, and you can't sort of criticise them because gardeners hate snails above all other molluscs and slugs as well, and of course that's one of the main diets of the song thrush. They'll even have some, if they find an old flint around the edge of the hedges here where the farm workers would have cleared the fields of large flints and popped the flint in the edge of the hedge. And if song thrush finds those, and then there's a good supply of snails nearby, then the song thrush will gather the snails and bash them on a particular flint. We call it an anvil. Looks like a blacksmith at work, and you'll often see a whole host of snail shells scattered around a particular flint. So really wonderful. But speckled bird, heavily speckled breast, and there's a slightest breeze coming from the south this morning, so he's facing the opposite way. He's not actually singing down the microphone, he's singing away to the other end of the wood. Perhaps that's where the female is. She's possibly feeding. And I can see him clearly now, right in the top of the tree, silhouetted against a sort of dull grey sky. Warm brown on the back, heavily speckled breast, and I can see the beak opening and closing in time with that melodious song. Oh, having a scratch behind the ear now. Not me, the thrush, but non-stop singing with this idiot standing below with a huge smile on his face. Absolutely beautiful. So one of those fastly declining UK species. Every garden had a pair of thrushes in years ago. Now quite scarce and a red list species, I believe. Declined more than 50% in the last 25 years. I've already walked around this wood. A big litter dump last night. 4 or 5 really large carrier bags and a small table dumped right near Notre Dame Wood here. So it put me in a bit of a mood. It's all in the back of the truck. Rat's already walked around this area of woodland, my terrier, and I popped him back in the car because I could hear this song thrush singing. Unfortunately, I got the microphone in the car, and it's one of those lovely moments that'll keep me going all day. There's either a smile on my face or an internal smile. Somebody just travelling down a little road, quite fast, only 20 feet from me, heading off to work in what we call the smoke in Norwich, a couple of miles away. And the world often does now pass by glorious sounds and sights like I'm listening to and watching at the moment. We're always, all of us, in such a hurry. Possession, goods that we collect through our lives, but sometimes they say the simple things in life are priceless, and that's one, and I'm just so thrilled to share it with whoever likes to listen. It's just glorious. Just moved away now. It's on quite a sharp incline. There were some old buildings right close to where I'm standing. They became derelict and knocked them all down about 40 years ago now. They were unsafe and away from any housing, but they were used by my grandfather to fatten the cattle, and the farm workers used to walk to the buildings. There's some cottages about a quarter of a mile away from me. I can see those right by Stoke Holy Cross to Norwich Road. And the farm workers would live in there and then walk up here, collect water from the stream, chalk bottom stream, running right next to where the buildings were. And an artist from the 1980s painted those buildings. I haven't actually got a photograph of them, but I got a lovely picture of them in late autumn sunshine. And it's hanging just above my wood burner in my bungalow to remind me of the buildings and all the work that was done here. And perhaps those farm workers from about a century ago now would have heard the same sound. And that's one wonderful thing about the countryside. I call it the living heritage. And the sound that we've just heard, and are still hearing, actually, still singing, carries on from generation to generation. And that's what you call proper heritage, the living heritage. Anyway, I'm going to head back to the farm now. I've got to unload some very large items of rubbish. Somebody's obviously cleared out cupboards, lots of clothes and things like that in very large carrier bags. And that's just a normal start to the day. But what we just listened to wasn't a normal start of the day. It's having the time to stop for a few minutes and listen. What a delight.
Chris, the sound of some of your favourite birds.
Matthew, it's one of the success stories for conservation at High Ash Farm. The house sparrows, one of those red list species, declined by 50% or more. And we have over 100 here. It's a huge smile on my face.
Chattering sparrows, just one of the sounds that you can hear on the High Ash Farm podcast. But we need a favour.
Yes, we do. We're asking for donations and any help that you can give to help keep the podcast going.
You can make a monthly or just a one-off payment. highashfarm.com/podcast.
Well done, Matthew.
Oh, let's take a seat back in the office after all that fresh air. It's quite, well, not bracing this morning, but it's chilly in the wind, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, I was well togged up and, yeah, well, you could expect it at this time of the year. So here we are back in the warm office. You're being treated like a gentleman this morning.
Well, as they used to say all those years ago on the radio, we've got a bumper bundle here.
I think we have.
Of post. Hello to Michael and Judith from East Sussex. Lovely card they've sent you there with some best wishes. Who else has sent a card here? Oh, Mary, who's in Chesham in Buckinghamshire. Lovely wild flowers on the front of that one.
Thank you for all of these cards.
Wishing you a speedy recovery. And there's a picture of a snail making his way through the spring foliage.
Yes.
And a lovely note in there as well from Jackie Taylor.
Oh, thank you, Jackie.
And Chris has been looking at all these. And
Yes.
Here's a postcard of a bird that we talk about quite often, the European robin.
Yes, yeah.
And that comes from, Illinois, USA. Valerie. Valerie, thanks for that. That's a lovely picture.
Yes, wow.
And here's a get well soon card from Tracy Horsefield. Wishing you a speedy recovery. There we are.
Yes, and thank you for the little package that came with that, Tracy. And also to Bonnie Van Dyne over in the States there. And she sent me a book to read when I'm in recovery mode, which I hope won't be too long.
Sue Belgrave sends an email. You and your podcast, Chris, have helped me through so many sleepless nights. I just want to thank you and wish you well over the next few weeks. I hope the op and surgery goes smoothly. That's
Thank
a
you
nice
very
note
much
as well,
indeed.
isn't
Let's
it?
hope my podcast didn't cause us sleepless nights.
I'm really excited as my husband and I are coming to High Ash Farm on the 29th from Market Harborough. This is our first ever visit. And we hope to make some subsequent visits this year in each of the seasons. Wow. That's from Liz and Brian, you see, because you see a different thing every season, don't
Yes,
you? Almost
do.
every week, in fact.
It does, and I have mentioned before the seasons in the UK, and particularly here at the farm, are incredibly different from each other. So there'll always be something exciting to see. Back
from America, Melanie Moeller from Western Oregon. that's quite a long way north, I think.
Yes,
in
it
the US,
is,
isn't
yeah.
it? Oregon.
Right
Some
up
of
in
the
forest.
The
region.
westerns of my youth, watching the Oregon Trail. I listen with joy and anticipation each year to what I call Chris's love letter to the foxglove. They're absolutely my favourite flower, dazzling spires, low maintenance, prolific germination and long bloom time. And this past December, last month, the warmest on record in my area, I was delighted to discover a small bloom tucked among some favour beans in my garden. I took this picture in May 2025 after Chris described how fingers fit perfectly into the flowers. And there we are. Yeah, absolutely.
That's an incredible photograph.
That's
Thank you.
Melanie's fingers.
Yes, and I used to do that to frighten the girls in the neighbouring school at Notre Dame in Norwich, and you just put the little foxglove cups, if you like, they fit over your fingers, and then you'd have a little claw on the end as well. But perfect photograph there, and thank you. And you can see the foxgloves with the little honey guides there, Digitalis purpurea.
Angela Smith, hello to you. I've been enjoying your dispatches from the countryside since the piece you used to do was on the radio, which is very occasional these days, but we sort of still do the odd little radio appearance.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
But in those days, Angela says, you once or twice played an extract from an incredible recording of a starling imitating an unbelievable variety of sounds and voices. And I'm sure all the new listeners to the podcast would love to hear it. Please play it again, says Angela.
Okay, your wish is my command, and here it comes.
It's quite extraordinary, this. You better explain what we're hearing.
Right, well, that's a male starling going to roost in one of the buildings, and a female is nearby, and he's gone through his repertoire of where he's been feeding during the day, including that bantam hen that you heard just into the beginning of the recording. And it's absolutely amazing. That recording has been around the world on the BBC World Service. We normally associate bird mimicry with birds like minor birds, for instance. They're very proficient. Parrots and budgies sometimes will do it, but the starling has to top trump them all, because this particular male bird goes through his repertoire of around 20 bird species, all of them absolutely perfect.
It's amazingly clever, isn't it? It's terrific fun, and those recordings, I think everyone loves them. So we don't mind, those of us who've been intimate with them in the past, hearing them again. Now to Norfolk, our home county here, and to the coast, Cromer, we go to for Margaret. Thank you for your enjoyable podcast. We've learnt a lot. And further afield from Norfolk, since listening weekly to your wanders round the farm, there seems to be a debate, though, going on at the moment about whether to feed the birds, especially from those hanging bird feeders. We've got a couple in our garden. Should we now take them down?
No, I think the advice is to keep them hanging up there. Garden bird feeders and garden birds are hugely important. We've got the big RSPB Garden Bird Watch around this time of the year always, and so I'd keep it going. There's some debate because of certain bird diseases which are carried on the outside of feeders, even in bird baths where they come for a drink. Even water is really important at this time of the year in late winter, and birds can pick up particular diseases. Chaffinches, for instance, pick up a fungal disease on their feet. Birds like greenfinches, I think bird watchers call it trick, which is trichomoniasis. It's a sort of fungal disease which gets around the beak and sort of furs it all up there. It's very unpleasant to see. Thing to do is to keep your feeders fairly clean. Don't let old bird feed sort of build up in them, but keep on feeding them. So there's a sort of debate going on at the moment, but to stop feeding garden birds UK-wide would be very, very sad.
And let's just go to the Peak District, another wonderful part of the world. Chris Hanley says, have you been watching The Winter Watch on BBC? On the first programme, talking about the gold crests and how they must consume 60% of body weight during the day to survive cold winter's nights. 80% of small birds can die. Is this correct, Chris? Can you explain what happens if they don't? I've got these visions of birds dying, yet I never see dead ones. I never notice daily depleted numbers.
Yes, that would apply. 80% of certain bird species, particularly the small ones, long-tailed tits, goldcrests, firecrests were mentioned there in the letter. And you can have huge mortality, and it goes right through to larger birds like waterfowl when you get a prolonged cold period. Things like kingfishers actually can't fish because they need to get into the water, and they'll often desert their normal habitats and move to a coastal region, for instance. So why you don't see the dead birds after a prolonged cold period is many of them are roosting at night in tree hollows, so if they die there you won't find them. And also there are predators about, active during the winter months. Things like stoats and weasels will pick up carrion on the woodland floor, and other birds as well. Early in the morning, magpies search our sort of country lanes looking for road casualties and take the food away. So you wouldn't see it, but those high statistics of deaths caused by cold weather is usually after a prolonged cold period of a week or more. And when you have snow cover as well, it makes hunting for birds, the nocturnal birds like owls, really, really difficult. They can't find their normal prey, and so they can get emaciated very quickly. And as they're early nesters, this is owl species like tawny owls and barn owls, they get depleted really quickly because the females need that subcutaneous fat from a regular supply of highly nutritious food to keep them going. And so inclement weather, even in the UK where it's relatively mild here compared to Central Europe, can cause a huge problem. But fortunately, most of the time we're spared those high mortality numbers.
And just finally, I've never heard of a place in Sussex called Ripe.
Yes.
Ripe. But Michael Morris has sent a note from there, a photograph. I think he must have been listening to our great fun we had in the snow, looking at the prints, the animal prints the other day. This looks like mud. And he says a tarpaulin was blown by the wind into the corner of the garden. I didn't get to move it for a few days, and when I did, I found a lot of little pock marks underneath where it had been, each about 7 to 10 centimetres, perhaps 5 to 7 centimetres wide, about 5 centimetres deep. Here's the photograph. I wonder what you think made them.
Right, there was initially, I thought long-tailed field mice, but then I actually looked at the pock marks, and whoever's been digging them were after the root structure of the grass, and that would almost certainly mean a vole, probably a short-tailed field vole, one of our commonest small mammals, which would ideally love to be under the tarpaulin. I can see where the tarpaulin shape was on the grass, and that's exactly where the pock marks are. And of course, feeding underneath the tarpaulin, it was safe from those predators I just mentioned. It's eat or be eaten out in the countryside, I can promise you. And so they look like sort of miniature rats with short ears and a very, very short tail and a stubby face. And so they're very common, and the main food of things like kestrels, buzzards will eat them, all sorts of the predator species, and getting underneath the tarpaulin would be stoats and weasels as well, which would also feast on them. Top prey, and it's a top prey species, but really common. So, and almost certainly that's what it is, short-tailed field vole.
Another podcast has sped by. Chris, thank you for keeping me out of the weather for most of it. He's been very benevolent today. And thanks for all your questions, comments, everything else coming in on email. And the address is, as always, chris@highashfarm.com. And you can go to the High Ash Farm website, highashfarm.com/podcast, to find out about donations that can keep this little thing going that we do most weeks.
That's what we keep hoping for, and fingers crossed. People are very generous and supporting the podcast. And thank you, everybody, for all the cards and support that we've received. Thank you.